Good morning, dear students. I am Rajesh and you are watching your favorite YouTube channel Learning with Rajesh. Dear student, in 10th class history, we have started lesson number 1 and the name of the lesson is Rise of Nationalism in Europe. So in the previous video, you have learnt about the rise of nationalism through the pictures given and drawn by Frederick Soryu, and you learned the meaning of nationalism or a nation state according to Ernest Renan. And after that, you also learned about what were the main reason of rising of nationalism in Europe. And after that, you learned about Napoleon Bonaparte, and you also learned that in 1815 some of the European powers defeated Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo. And you also learned about Napoleon Code in the previous video. And today we will learn about the after process or incidents after 1815 in Europe and the various countries. And let's start today's work by starting with Vienna Congress. You learned that now in 1815 some European powers like Britain, Russia and Prussia and Austria, they defeated Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo. So they met at Vienna to draw up a settlement for Europe, and this meeting was known as Vienna Congress. I hope you learned the meaning of Vienna Congress now. What was Vienna Congress? And after that, what were the main decisions taken in that Vienna Congress? It is the major question of the lesson for 5 marks in CBSE exam. So Vienna Congress has declared some many improvement in Europe. Justify the statement. You will write some points from this note. So the major decision taken, the Congress host was Austrian Chancellor Duke Metternich. It will be objective type question in exam. Who was the host of that Vienna Congress? You will write that Austrian Chancellor Duke Metternich. And the next, they declared to undo the change by Napoleon. You learnt in Napoleon Code that Napoleon done some change in France. It means they undo all change by which were done by the Napoleon Bonaparte. What was the first change by this Vienna Congress? The Bourbon dynasty restored to power. It means the monarchy system again settled. And the next, a series of states were set up on the boundaries of France to stop expansion. So number of states were settled on the boundary of France that the France could not expand the boundary. For this purpose, number of states were settled on the boundary of France. And next, German Confederation of 39 states set up by Napoleon was felt untouched. It means they did not change in that German Confederation. I hope you learned the first major point of today, that what was Vienna Congress and what were main decisions taken in that Vienna Congress. Next, the revolutionaries. In Europe, what was the meaning of that revolutionary? And you will learn about Giuseppe Mazzini in this stanza or in this note. Those who opposed monarchy and fought for liberty and freedom were known as revolutionary in Europe at that time after 1815. You learned that Vienna Congress also settled monarchy, the Bourbon dynasty in France. It was a monarchy, and who opposed that monarchy known as revolutionary in Europe. Giuseppe Mazzini was one of the important or one of the famous revolutionary of Italy. He was born in Genoa in 1807. and he found two underground groups, which is very important for MCQ type question or objective type question in exam. What were two underground groups or societies found by Giuseppe Mazzini? And you will write that Giuseppe Mazzini founded Young Italy in Marseilles and Young Europe in Bern. He found two underground groups named as Young Italy and Young Europe. And the next point is Mazzini believed the God had intended nations to be natural units. So he believed that God is also favorable for nation state. All the countries should be as a nation state. He believed that. So he also believed that Italy should be united. It should be a nation state. I hope you learned the second point also in easy way. And the next point of today is the age of revolution in Europe. The age of revolutions. And in which country the revolution? Firstly, you will learn about a revolution of 1830 in France. Revolution of 1830 and result in France. It took place in July 1830 in France. The king was overthrown by liberals. You learnt about liberal in the previous video, that liberals were in favor of liberty and freedom and right to speech, etc. And these liberals overthrown the king, which was settled by the provision of 1815 Vienna Congress. And as a result, constitutional monarchy installed in France, and the head of that monarchy was Louis Philippe. I hope you learned that in 1830 what was the major revolution in France and what was the result. And next, there was also a revolution, or it means a war in Greek. It was known as Greek War of Independence. So there will be a question in exam, write a note on Greek War of Independence, or what do you know about the Greek War of Independence. So Greek was part of Ottoman Empire, Ottoman Turkey, you learnt in 9th class also. So Ottoman Empire controlled Greek at that time. And nationalism in Europe encouraged Greeks. It means the people of Greek were encouraged by the nationalism in Europe in various countries. And the Greek War of Independence, it began in 1820. Poet and artist lauded Greece as the cradle of European civilization. It means the European countries and European people also helped Greek to independent from Ottoman Empire. So they helped Greeks. And English poet, for example, English poet Lord Byron organized funds, it means collected funds, and fought the War of Independence for Greek. And finally, the Treaty of Constantinople of 1832 recognized Greece as an independent nation. So it is very important question for objective type in exam. So how did Greek got independence? What was the treaty? And you will you will write that Constantinople Treaty of 1832. Next major point of today is how did culture help to grow nationalism in Europe? You learned that some people revolted against the king, like you learned Giuseppe Mazzini was one of that revolutionary, and you also learned that people fought war for their nationalism, for their independence. But on the other hand, culture also played an important role to grow nationalism in Europe. So you will learn that how did culture help to grow nationalism? And in culture there was romantic imagination which helped the national feeling, and you will learn in next points now. So culture played an important role to grow nationalism in Europe. In culture there was a romanticism. So there will be objective type question in exam. What is the meaning of romanticism? You will write that a cultural movement which helped in nationalism in Europe. Now there is a question in your mind, so what type of culture was there in that romanticism? According to romanticism, or in romanticism, poet authors focused on emotions and mystical feelings, and they opposed the idea of science. According to romanticism, it means in romanticism it was the development of culture, like poem and like folk dances and emotions and mystical feelings. And to promote that romanticism, a poet focused on folk songs, folk poetry, and folk dances. I hope you will learn this point easily now. And next point of today is a role of vernacular language also. In culture, firstly you learned that romanticism played an important role to grow nationalism. There are three major points included in that answer. First is in culture, romanticism played important role, and then vernacular language. You know that vernacular language here means the local language. For example, in Haryana, Haryanvi is a vernacular language here. So how did vernacular language help in nationalism? So vernacular language carried nationalist message to illiterate. You know that in Haryana, in number of villages, people are illiterate now. If you want to promote Indian nationalism, you have to speak in their local language. Otherwise, they are not able to understand English or other language. So I hope you learned this point with that example. The next example given there in your NCERT book, a Poland example is there under Russia. Poland was a country under Russia at that time, and under Russia they promoted their local language and music. When they were under Russia, they promoted their local language to promote nationalism, to give the nationalism idea to the illiterate people. I hope you learned the point. And the next is language. So there is a difference in vernacular language and language, you know. So that in Haryana, Hindi is a language there and not a vernacular language. You know that language also played an important role in nationalism in Europe. So for example, Russia forced Russian language on Polish, on people of Poland that time. But they used their language as a weapon of national resistance. Polish was used in church, etc. You learned that there is a major reason how the language promoted nationalism. Polish used their own language when they were under Russia to use it as a weapon of national resistance. We will use our language. How dare you tell us to use the Russian language? We will use our language as a protest. I hope you learned this point now. Polish language is used in church, etc. And Russian officers sent them jail. The people who used that Polish language under Russia, they were sent to jail by the Russian officers. But they used language as a weapon of resistance. They did not stop it while using the language. I hope you learned that point also. How did culture promoted nationalism on grow nationalism in Europe? And the next and major point of last point of today is age of hunger, hardship, and popular revolt in Europe. So why did hunger and hardship and popular revolt there in Europe at that time? Reasons. Increasing population was the reason of hunger, because as you know that land is limited and population was growing in Europe. So that's why increasing population created the shortage of grain, and unemployment was also the reason of that hunger and hardship and revolt. And next is federal system. You learned that uh, according to federal system, the people have to serve their lord. This federal system also played an important role in revolt. And next, rise of prices. As you know that due to increasing of population, there was shortage of grain and edible things. And if there is shortage, you know that is a rule of economy, rule of economics. You learned that if there is shortage of things, a price will be high. So you know that a rise in price is also the reason of that revolt, popular revolt in Europe at that time. And next is insecurity of industries. Small industries were not secured by the government, the different monarchies. I hope you learned the reason of that hunger, hardship, and revolt in Europe. Example there, a revolt in 1845 when weavers in Silesia revolted against contractors. Why did they revolt against contractors, weavers? Because they gave less payment for ready-made things. These contractor gave them provided them raw material, and but after making the ready-made things, the final goods, they gave them a less money. So that's why the weavers in Silesia revolted in 1845 against their contractors. I hope you learned this point also. I think you enjoyed this session today, and you will learn all the things of lesson number 1 of history in 10th class. If you are new on my YouTube channel, please subscribe the channel, like and share also. Thank you and have a nice day ahead.